Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Joseph, and today I'll be talking to you about cooperative development districts. Um, I wanted to start a little bit, or first with a little bit about the background of this and why this came up as a topic or a potential need or a need. So, um, as a little bit of background about what's happening currently in the small business community here in New York City is New York City has not always been an easy place to open and operate a business. And so there are numerous contributing factors to that. Before the pandemic in 2019, 2018, and years before, small businesses always struggled with several things, including high rent, regulatory challenges, high taxes. Um, and so, when the pandemic came around, many of those businesses who couldn't were having a hard time making it previously, they ended up closing their doors for those same reasons. And now as the city tries to recover in this time of the pandemic or this point in the pandemic, they continue to struggle, and even more so, if not as much as before. So we do have some potential because there's a lot of room for improvement. Because right now what business owners are facing is like unaffordable leases, a lot of what we call competition, or this idea of competition, and there's gaps in what's tangible for potential solutions to some of these problems. So I'm only listing three here because we don't have time to go through all of the necessary challenges that business owners face, but we have a lot of potential. And so one of the potential solutions is economic democracy. Now, what is economic democracy? Some of my colleagues have already outlined it in many ways, but just to give a general idea, economic democracy is about democratic control over our economic lives. And that means deprivatization of resources such as enterprises, land, and capital. And this is a system where markets can exist, but they do not have to dominate the way they do now. Some examples of economic democracy or players in economic democracy are credit unions, like our friend Amanda Trainer works at, work cooperatives, public banks, community land trusts, and participatory budgeting. Some of these elements we'll get into in this presentation, but not all of them. And so these are just a few to name, just a few that we're naming here. So going into a little bit more background about how we got to cooperative development districts before we get into the details of that. We looked at a few studies, quite a few, but I wanted to highlight a few here, and I'm not going to get into it because there's a lot of details into these three case studies that we looked at, but they are Rondo Community Land Trust in St. Paul, Minnesota, Afrikaanderwijk in Rotterdam, Netherlands, and Preston, UK. So Rondo Community, the first one is a community land trust. The Netherlands has a multi-stakeholder and secondary stakeholder co-ops, and Preston model is a more holistic view of how economic democracy can work. And all of these are tied into the model that we'll be outlining here today. And we'll get into that. So in thinking about those three case studies that I mentioned before, try to look at what New York City has that could model or can be foundations for some of the work that we could do for the cooperative development district. And these things, these items or these elements include special assessment districts, worker cooperatives, and community land trusts. And we'll get into each one of these as well right now. So first, special assessment districts could provide a basic and consistent revenue stream for a cooperative district. And let's go into why. According to the state of New York, there are three requirements to be a special assessment district. It's having a defined area. There's a funding tool for improvement and services for inhabitants of the area. And there's a real property tax that's levied or assessed to fund the improvements or services that are being provided. The most common type of special assessment district in New York is the business improvement districts. This is a public-private partnership. There are 76 bids across New York City, so there's a huge network that's currently available. And these bids are staple to their community, their commercial districts. They do have a board that typically consists of property owners, business owners, local government and elected officials, and to some extent, residents. However, the limiting fact here is that due to location, the funding could be limited. So if you're in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn versus downtown Manhattan or 42nd Street, for example, your funding is very different. So your resources are not as great. So something to highlight there. The next element that I wanted to talk about briefly before we got into the cooperative district itself was worker cooperatives. In 2015, City Council supported and funded the creation of Worker Cooperative Business Development Initiative, which is housed at the Department of Small Business Services. And this has created a massive backing or support for cooperative development. So this launched New York into being the state with the most worker cooperatives, actually, and 91 out of 110 are in New York City alone. So we have a great network of worker cooperatives in New York City. And the third element I wanted to talk about was community land trusts. Now this map, you should all check it out. It's really great to understand and see what's available in New York as far as cooperative economics, but the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City has created a map that outlines or lets you know where you can find solidarity economy tools or companies. And so what I've highlighted here are the worker cooperatives and the community land trusts. But for this slide, we're specifically talking about a framework for commercial space. Community land trusts were created in the 70s for affordable land ownership and has been used as a tool for affordable housing. So what we would like to do here is think about how we can use community land trusts for commercial purposes, much like in the Rondo Community Land Trust in St. Paul, Minnesota. The challenge with community land trusts has been in places where it does exist is that they carry a higher purchasing price and operational costs. So again, funding is another issue, but they could be used to support small businesses in a commercial land trust because they would provide affordable leases to business owners. So getting into the cooperative development district. Cooperative development district will be defined as, or a CDD, would be defined as a special assessment district that provides support, advocacy, resources connecting to public services and cooperative development to a defined neighborhood and its constituents. And it has 5 elements. Previously, it had 4, but we had to really flesh out some of these things. And one of the things that really became necessary was specifically outlining number 2, but we'll get to that in a moment. The first thing that's really necessary for a cooperative development district to be successful would be a neighborhood comprehensive plan. So a neighborhood comprehensive plan, there are many types of these things currently exist. They're called PARs, they're called community needs assessments. It depends on, the organization that decides to pick this up and become a cooperative development district, what they decide to do as far as what they like to use as a tool. But the point is to get the neighborhood and the residents and the people who are heavily involved in the community to participate in the creation of this plan. And this plan would include what are the needs of the neighborhood, from transportation to the skills of the neighborhood or the people in the neighborhood, what kinds of jobs are they looking for, what kind of jobs do they work, just a variety of things just to make sure that they understand what the need is exactly. And this would also outline and help to make the determination of what kind of cooperatives they'd like to see in their neighborhood, or if they need a secondary cooperative or multi-stakeholder cooperative. That comprehensive plan would be very, very important as a first step to developing the cooperative development district. The next element would, of course, be the cooperative development itself. And this could be, this would come out of the comprehensive plan, and it could result in a series of worker cooperatives, consumer cooperative, as mentioned before, or producer cooperative or multi-stakeholder cooperative. The other need or pillar here is the institution building. This is very important because as you see that there are 76 bids, if there were 76 cooperative development districts, there's a federation here of of local support within New York City that could be developed and built. Or externally and internally, if you develop a multi-stakeholder cooperative, business owners would be able to work together to have some buying power. The fourth element would be to address the challenge of business owners, which is about around their affordable leases. And so land stewardship would be really important. The purchase of land would help the business owners to have leases that will be more affordable than if they were in the market economy. And then lastly, of course, is knowledge sharing. It's really important in economic democracy to teach on all levels. So that means that having a board and a governance structure that supports all members of the community, which include the adults and the youth, the business owners, and even street vendors who serve the community would be really, really important. Whereas for business improvement districts right now, there is a limitation to who can be on that board. And there is a class structure that's in place that restricts the members of that board. So knowledge sharing and the governance structure will be really important here. So let's take a step into the future. It's the year 2030. It's New York City, and we are going to highlight two types of cooperative development districts. One is a former business improvement district, and the second one is a local development corporation. So the former BID previously had a class structured board with no residents, an annual tax revenue that was very low and limited their programming. The focus was on street cleaning and beautification of the corridor, which was nice, but there was also a high vacancy rate. Currently, as a community development district, they have additional funding from the city or state to increase programming. They have established a community land trust to purchase property. They own a mixed use property with a business incubator and affordable housing in this mixed use property, as it was requested by the community. They've expanded their service area, so they're now not just a commercial district, but they're serving a larger, broader area. They have a thriving worker cooperatives and a multi-stakeholder cooperative. They have a diverse board with both youth and residents, as well as local street vendors. And they host participatory budgeting sessions to decide what to do with that money that they're getting from the city and the state. Let's look at the second neighborhood. And this is a local development corporation. They hosted a few programs which included job training and entrepreneurship, and they had limited capacity to serve a full scope of the community's needs, despite what the community might have wanted or needed before. Currently, as a community development district, they've established a community land trust as well, offering affordable rent to small business owners in the newly formed catchment area. And they have a holistic job training and job placement within the community. So they serve local business owners and firms, both co-ops and non-co-ops. And they also have partnered with the property owners, they've partnered with the local property owners. They've also expanded to include a commercial corridor and added a tax assessment to their revenue for stability. And they also are able to now host educational events about economic democracy to spread that education and that knowledge about solidarity economies. And then they also now advocate for, as a coalition or alongside a coalition, for policies and additional financial resources from the city and the state. So what's next? There's a few elements that are still kind of missing from this idea, which include really trying to hammer down the policy aspect of this, what kind of funding is necessary as well, and a little bit more creativity. I think we've stuck very strongly to the bid model, but I think there's a lot of other options there. So getting support on that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.